Hey, Darren.
Hey, John. Good
We're
afternoon.
gonna afternoon. We're gonna be talking branding.
Love it.
Um, yeah, it's kind of that weird word, isn't it? A brand, because like if you're Nike or Coca Cola, you're kind of like you really know what your brand is. If you're like Bob's accountancy practice that might have three branches around three different towns or something, it's a little bit more difficult, isn't it?
It is, and I look at the word brand and other words within our industry as umbrella words that are really they're big, broad words that can mean different things to different people. And it's I learned this at university. It was the exercise was I say the word chair,
Mm.
and you're thinking of maybe a counter stool. I'm thinking of a fold up chair that I use for watching sporting events. But this
Mm.
concept of this bigger word can have different connotations to different people. And I think the way you've just explained this around different organizations and how they interpret the
Mm.
word brand can absolutely mean different things to different people. And therefore, with that comes, and what does it take to either build a brand, maintain a brand,
Mm.
protect your brand will have different implications for different size organizations. I agree with
Yeah.
you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dig in, tell everybody who you are, what you do. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Darren Horwitz. I am the founder of 1010 Group. We are a brand implementation firm, which is a very fancy way of saying we help organizations get things done when they're going through a rebrand. My background was beginning in television production, where I learned how to speak a little bit of everyone's language to get a show produced. I then evolved into the world of branding. Somebody introduced me to it back when it was more production. I was a production guy. I would make files and assets and templates and guidelines, but it evolved over time. And so, as one of my last jobs at one of the global branding agencies was really the term activation and implementation, which again was really just around, I guess my specialty became the logistics of uh, planning for a rebrand, building out your brand tools, or even protecting your investment on the back end, and making sure that your brand is being well maintained, well managed, well governed. So the way we've structured our offerings at 1010 Group is around this concept of plan, build, manage. But really, it's just helping people navigate the process of organizations, of global organizations, airlines, healthcare systems, small regional organizations, really businesses of all shapes and sizes.
Mm.
I feel very fortunate that I get to do this. We've been doing this for 9 years now, and the fact that people such as yourself will listen to anything I have to say around this topic, just it's another great day. But hopefully, as we talk through today, and in general with our clients and our partners, that we can provide a value to help people just
Yeah,
build, I guess, better brands and
yeah,
show their brands in a better way and protect their brands.
yeah. I like the name 1010. It's good branding, that.
Thank you. I like any recommendation I would have for a client. I hired a naming expert, so I didn't come up with that myself. They we went through it, but it was a really cool exercise, and I
Mm.
think we're a small business, so I would say if we think about small businesses, even as you start to name yourself, naming is a really tough thing. I'm not an expert in it, but it always comes down to something very basic, which is what's your website URL and is it available? And then
Mm.
you back out of that and say, okay, so for me, it could have been Horwitz and Associates. Well, that's not really the
Mm.
brand I wanted to build around my name of
Yeah,
the business. I wanted something bigger and different and out there. Then you get into the naming of words that don't make any sense to anybody, or you get into fancy
yeah.
spellings, or you get into different URLs. But ultimately, for us, we went to a woman who was a naming expert, and she took us through an exercise, very brief exercise. What's the purpose of our business? What are we trying to do? She listened to us and she came back with several different options, everything from octopus and pineapple to where we landed with 1010. And ultimately, it came
Mm.
down to this for us. What we mean by 1010 is there's, I guess, an adage or a wives' tale that says we are only using a fraction of our brains. Maybe we're only using 10% of our brains, and there's so much more potential left. And for us, we felt that brands were only using a fraction of their potential. And really, through the work that we were going to do, we felt that we could help them maximize their potential, thereby using 100% of their brand potential, or a 10 out of 10. So that's where the name 1010 came from. Of course, the downside is, I will not lie, there's a Japanese anime company or business
Oh,
called
right.
1010.
Is
So
there?
we get a lot of hits on our website that are not necessarily meant for us, but that's okay. I think
That's okay.
ultimately going to 1010 Group helped us with that. But yeah, that's where the
Yeah,
name
yeah.
came from.
Yeah, it's good branding, which kind of leads me into the first question is what would you say the word brand should mean for the small, medium sized business? I'm not talking Coca Cola, Microsoft, Google, I'm not talking about globals because it's a different world altogether, but for the average company in the average town or city.
Sure. I think, well, there's the obvious one, which is our logo. And I think the watch out is that everybody thinks that brand and logo are synonymous. And while your logo is your mark, and it's important, I think there's a lot more to a brand. And even just thinking through us, we're a small business. We are very fortunate to work with big clients, but we are very small. I would say, to me, it is how we express ourselves. Um, but I think even before how we express ourselves, it's what do we stand for? What is the
Mm,
business that we are in? What are the problems that we're trying to sell? What are our differentiators that make us unique to somebody else? I would say from there, it's who are we as a group of people? So, how do we define ourselves as a culture? And for us, it came down to a couple of different basic things. Um, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take the work very seriously. So that was part of who we are and what our brand stands for. Um, it was also, everything we do needs to be actionable. So people need to see us and know that it's not just a deck or a story. It's they can do something with what we produce and deliver. And I think lastly is important to who we are as a business is who I am as a person, which is I don't believe in nickel and diming people or sticking to a scope. I believe in solving problems and being able to flex a little bit. And I wrote this down the other day because somebody brought this up. We don't just deliver on a scope, we solve problems. And I know that's kind of a
mm,
lofty thing to say, but I think what it's meant to do is when we work with our partners, the feedback we get is always, wow, we love working with you guys because you're flexible, you listen to us, you understand. And to me, that's really critical because I think it goes to my personal brand of who I am as an individual. And then it's extended through the business. And then it's how I teach others who work at 1010 what we stand for and how we approach business. So I think that's part of it. So from there, we've got a business idea, we have a logo, we have a name. Of course, there's a visual expression. So, how we tell our stories visually through PowerPoint or other, how we express ourselves on our website. And I think it goes beyond that to just, I would say it's an alignment of all your experiences coming together in a consistent way
mm,
so that no matter who your customer or clients are, they can anticipate what it's like to do business with you and what they should be getting from you. And it's the same each and every time. It's consistency. And yes, there's a logo behind that. I will tell you from my agency days, the way a brand was explained to clients was your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And I didn't make this up,
yeah.
but I do like it. So it is, how would somebody describe you when you're not there? How would they describe your business? So to me, that's how I define brand, is all of those things.
Yeah.
But it stems from a business strategy. I think, what is your business? What are you trying to do as a business? Now, how can you express that in a way that stays true to that and delivers on that, but also as people? And I think that's the one we often forget about. It's really important to have your employees or anybody who uses your brand to present it consistently and understand why it's important and what
Mm,
it stands for and how to use it. So,
yeah. I, when I've spoken to folk in the past, that they don't seem to have too much trouble to kind of like say, what kind of business are we? What are we like? What are our values? How do we? What they have trouble in is being able to express that to other people in something other than just being able to say it to them. Because you can't speak it to everybody, really, can you? You have to somehow display it to everyone. How do you get around that?
That's interesting. I think certainly in your, well, there's several different ways to express your brand. There is definitely the one-on-one conversations that I would have. And I look at this as when we work with clients going through some sort of a branding exercise and they're going through a rebrand, it's always, why are we doing this? So can every employee go home and tell their family over dinner what the business does and why they went through this branding exercise in a way that's meaningful? I think that the way to do that is to prepare people with um, what their role is in understanding what is it that you're asking of someone, and therefore what do they need. So if you're asking a sales team to go out and promote the business and the proof points of how you do the business well, what do they need to support that to tie it together? And obviously there's a visual expression that goes through it. And this is often sometimes what leads to a rebrand, which is, does my visual expression match my business strategy? Is it antiquated? Um, Imagery, keep it simple with
Hmm.
imagery. Do your images match your clients and customers in a way that they see themselves in that, and therefore they can align themselves to your brand and see themselves using your products? Do your own people internally, are they being portrayed in imagery? Even if it's a stock photo, does it match who your employee base is? So I think there's part of that. Again, the culture, the soft side to business of how do we work together? That's part of your brand. I guess these are less tangible than the visual expression. The fonts, I'll give you a great example.
Hmm.
So years ago, I led the implementation for American Airlines Rebrand when I was
Yeah.
back at the agencies. And I don't know if you remember this, but in their advertising, they were always using all caps in their headlines.
Hmm.
And the business change to the brand change was all about making American Airlines more approachable. And so the statement was, when they went through the visual exercise, we're changing your headlines to sentence structure because you're yelling at people in all caps.
Yeah.
And it's going to contradict who you are, what you're trying to do. The same thing with the logo. What used to be called a bird of prey has changed visually to soften the visual of this so that there's a visual expression that allows them to be much more optimistic as an airline. So when you go now, it's some years later, so I haven't flown American in a while,
Hmm.
but the point is, when you go in there, the experience that you have, the journey that you take with the airline, it is not only the words they're using, it's the attitude that they have at the counter, it's how they treat you when you're on the plane. It's also the visuals of the plane. The lighting of the plane can be softened, and I'm sure you see this when at the airline. I think Virgin did a really good job with bringing their brand to life through the visual experience, through everything, a long time ago. And again, so I think there are ways that you express yourself um, that bring your brand to life beyond just the
Hmm.
words themselves or the stories.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you mentioned about almost like a holistic approach to it, where you've got your staff as well as being a part of it. Do you think some good training is needed to train all your staff about how the company should be portrayed instead of just saying, go sell stuff?
I absolutely 100%. And I think and sales is not my area of expertise, but I think any
Hmm.
sales leader, any team leader would feel the same way. And so, we look at this. I look at this in a tactical way. From my world, is if somebody goes out and they're using their brand through marketing collateral, and let's just say they showed you a picture of what a brochure should look like, and then you gave that one picture to 20 people and you said, go make your brochures on your own. You're going to end up with 20 different, very different brochures.
Hmm.
But if you can take the time to document the decisions that you're making, the creative decisions of what a brochure should look like, here are the tools that you need to create a brochure. And let me give you all the guardrails so that you're really taking the individual interpretation off the table. That what one is really left with is, yes, there is some creative freedom within doing this, but it's within defined parameters. And I would think that would be the same with training as far as any restaurant chain, right? Any server. There is a leader that says, this is what we're trying to do. There should be training and meetings. And I think the biggest thing is, how can you expect somebody to deliver on your vision if you're not explaining what your vision is or what the expectations are. So there's a show. I love the show. I don't know if you have it in the UK. I'm sure you have some version of it. It's called Undercover Boss. Do you have anything like this?
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think I
so
know what you
this
mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll give you the gist of it. Right. It was always
Hmm.
about it was a reality TV show, and there was a CEO, and they'd always walk in and say to the CEO, "Okay, tell us what's going on." And the CEO would say, "There's a problem with my brand. I'm going to go into the field undercover, and I'm going to fix the people who are doing this." And the whole point was the CEO was sitting there saying, "It's the employee's fault. This is the problem of the employee's fault." And I'll cut to the chase without the a longer winded story. But the bottom line is by going into the field, they actually started to talk to people, and they started to learn that the people wanted to do the right things. They just
Yeah.
didn't have the tools or the training or the understanding to do that. And the CEO quickly realized it's not about fixing the people, it's about fixing the infrastructure to empower the people to deliver on the needs. And I think brands are the same way, whether you're a big organization or a small company. And I might argue that a smaller company might be harder to do that because you don't
Yeah.
have the formalized training in place. But I think it's really great. And I'm sure you can walk into any local store and you know the people who work there. And you know that the person behind the counter, that's a person you enjoy seeing every day getting your tea or coffee, or I really don't want to work with that person and I'm going to go
Hmm.
down the street to a different coffee shop or a different tea spot. So I think it's the same thing, big or small.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, should we look at our competitors when we try and differentiate ourselves? Should we try and look at what they're doing, and then should we try and do something different? Or the reason I ask the question is that when you go out there, particularly with smaller businesses, everybody seems to be much of a muchness. To be honest, we're friendly, we're approachable, we're everybody's like that. Do you know what I mean? That it is very difficult when you're smaller to be able to differentiate between you and your competitor.
Yes, I will tell you personally. So I went through this exercise as well. We are 9 years old now, and as unique as I thought I was, or the business I was starting, maybe it wasn't so unique. Um, I think it was a couple of things that actually when I started my business. So using that framework that we came up, plan, build, manage. When I first started my business and my specialty was in rebrand logistics, I went to a client at the time from the agency side that I become friends with, and was a bit of a mentor. And I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of quitting and starting this business." And he said to me, "Well, I understand why I would use you if you're rebranding. But what if I'm not rebranding?" And I said, "Oh." And so it took me 6 months to figure out how to answer that question because I asked somebody what their thought of what I was doing. They knew me as an
Hmm.
individual, they knew me professionally, they knew what I was capable of. I made it very clear I wasn't looking to start another design firm or brand agency. I really saw an opportunity to focus on something different. Um, but they saw a limitation. So that took me several months to solve that, which is where the managed side came into things and said, "Okay, here's how you protect your investment in a way that maybe you don't have all the money in the world to do this. Um, we can help you figure out which levers to pull to make your brand a little tighter." So it started there by asking people what they thought of my business and how I could differentiate myself a little bit. It was really painful to look at the competitive landscape. Um,
Hmm.
the agencies did a little bit of what we did, but I wasn't too concerned because I had built offerings for the agencies and they wanted to work with us. So that wasn't so bad. But there are one or two firms out there who do what we do. And I was afraid to look at them because I thought what I was doing was so special that if
Hmm.
I looked at them, it might either deflate what I felt was making unique, or maybe I would pick up ideas from them that I didn't want to pick up because I didn't want to copy them. But ultimately, when I did look, I did find, yeah, there are some overlaps, but here's what we do different. And one of the things we do different is we're flexible. Now, that may
Hmm.
seem like, again, to your point, that may not, that's table stakes, but
Yeah.
it's weird that you would think these are table stakes, but yet people don't deliver on them. So, hey, we're nice, we're unique. I think it's worth remembering those things if you can deliver on them. So that I think is important. As far as the differentiators, I was working with somebody who I was struggling with this in what what problem am I solving? Because that's where we were also going to differentiate ourselves. Why is it that somebody needs to work with me over somebody else? And that threw me back. And it was only recently that I was able to start to think through this and say, I need to change not just here's what I do, which is the easier thing. But here's why you need to work with us. And it was, I understand your world. This is the problem we're solving, and here's why we are doing this. And at that point, you can see that we're solving problems differently than somebody else. So in the retail space, maybe that's a little harder. Maybe it's if it's food services, maybe it's our ingredients are different. Maybe it's our recipes are handed down from family generation to generation. I think there's all different things.
Yeah.
If it's a electronics store, maybe it's you can't compete with the internet if you're a family-owned electronics store in a small chain. So maybe it's about dialing up the service that you provide, the value add, which is around. And I would say this to any client: I don't care who you work with. Yes, I'm in business to make money, but what I care about is that you have a good experience going through a branding exercise. Because if you're successful at that, that betters my industry. And the better my industry is, the more business I will do. Not to mention, you're going to remember that as someone who just wanted to help you solve something, not sell you something. So again, going back to the smaller electronics store, I would think customer service would really be the differentiator between that and say, and I can't think of the big box stores, but whether it's Walmart, Target, or whatever big box stores, those are differentiators. So I don't know,
Yeah.
is that addressing your question?
Yeah, it does absolutely. Yeah, I approached it myself a few years ago in a way of trying to figure out who I'm not,
Well, that's a big
um,
one.
and what I don't do. Um, and I found that was really enlightening because my main part of what I do is running training courses and things, and I discovered after many years of doing this that what I'm not good at and what I don't think works for other people is that 10 people, all from a different business, all in one room, all trying to learn email marketing. Right.
Yeah.
Everybody, all 10 people come away with I've learnt a bit, but it wasn't that good. But when you put one person into a room with 3 or 4 people from one individual company, you could, and that's what I realized I was no good at that. That's not good. I can't deliver that properly. And it's kind of looking at what you're not. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's a really interesting point. And it took us a while to get there, which is you have to know your swim lane. And
Hmm.
it's really hard to say no to people. I think that takes a lot of courage as a small
Hmm.
business to be comfortable saying no. We had Google came to us with a project, and I ultimately had to say no. And as much as I wanted to work with Google, I mean, it was like, wow, to add that to a
Hmm.
portfolio, awesome.
Hmm.
But the reality was, I was not going to be able to deliver on what they were looking for. And I had to be the team. We were trying to figure this out, but we had to be very honest with ourselves. And it was one of the hardest no's I ever had to give. But it empowered me to learn from that. I think to your point of, well, what is it we're really good at delivering on? We don't have to say yes to everything. We don't have to deliver on everything. But
Yeah.
what we do deliver on, it has to be the best that we can be. And I agree
Yeah.
with you on that. That's interesting. A friend of mine, much earlier on in our lives, he was going through a series of, he was a serial dater, had a bunch of girlfriends, and they weren't working out. And at some point, I guess he talked to a therapist in some way about relationships in general. And he came back and he said to me, "Yeah, I've decided to start looking at what I don't want in a relationship." And I was
Hmm.
like, whoa. And it was kind of eye opening. It's like, okay, so you're starting from a place of, what bad looks like. You may not
Yeah.
know what good looks like to perfection, but you certainly know bad, and you can rule those things out. I think that's brilliant. What you're doing. I think that's a great way to look at it, and
Yeah.
I think that's smart. I think that's
Yeah. I
very
think you
smart.
get better answers when you decide what you're not. Because if you sit there and think to yourself, "Oh, let me make a list of everything I can do," right? Everything the list can just keep going and going and going and going and going. But when you actually do it the opposite way and you do the reverse, I think it becomes more
I,
useful.
I'm I I think I'm going to have to go back and reevaluate some of this stuff as we I think we've been over 9 years pretty successful in really narrowing down our specialty and owning it, and by owning it I mean accepting it, what we're not. And so I would say from our
Yeah.
perspective, we're not brand strategists. We're not going to go, I mean, yes, we've created logos, but that's not what we do better. And
Mm.
I had somebody come to me and ask me, oh, I'm thinking of rebranding. I wanted to talk to you. I said, look, for who you are and what you need, we are definitely not the people for you, but let me make some introductions. And I think that
Mm.
goes a long way. Again, I think it's just what do you subscribe to as a business or a business
Yeah, yeah.
owner, and how you treat people. There's a great book, The Giver. I think it's The Giver or The Go Giver. The Go Giver, and
Mm.
it's I don't know if you know of this book or if you've read it. It's an easy
No.
read, but somebody recommended it to me, and it was basically about philosophy of how you sell to people, how you treat people in growing a business and in a sales oriented business. And it follows this salesperson who just he takes on a mentor and he gets his whole perspective gets turned around. And I think what it shows, and this is we're getting way off topic, but I think
Mm.
it speaks to what you're saying, which is what I found fascinating and what I subscribe to is it wasn't just about the sale. And I think that goes back to your
Sure.
earlier question of how are you defining a brand? It's not just the sale, it's your whole philosophy that then you can train others and teach others. And I think
Yeah.
it goes back to a little bit of what you're saying now, which is here's what I am not, and here's what I am.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the
Yeah.
book, but I love what you're saying. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. So, final question. We've chatted a while. So, final question. What triggers or what should trigger a rebrand? Should it be like everybody thinks we're
Well, there are some
rubbish?
good answers to that, and there are some okay, interesting answers to that. So there, okay. So the good answers are the stronger reasons to do this are our business has evolved and our brand has not kept up. Um, our our strategy has evolved. Our offerings have evolved. We've acquired businesses. We've merged with others. We've pivoted from the pandemic, and our expression, and by expression, the broader statement of expression, has not kept up. We need to think about, at the very least, refreshing, whether that's photography or going from all caps to sentence case, or
Mm.
maybe it's a different color palette. Maybe it is your logo, but that's an expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
Other things you can integrate over time and evolve, evolution versus revolution. So I think it all starts with the business rationale. Has your business evolved and your brand has not kept up? I've also seen where there's a leadership change and they want to signal change. And the best way to signal change is through a visual expression change. So there's a reason. Do I think that's the greatest reason personally? It's a reason. And
Mm.
maybe it depends on the business and who they are. Maybe they're trying to do something for Wall Street or the stock exchange and their investors. The U.S. Army went through a rebrand, and their whole rationale was not leadership change per se, but it was around the needs of the recruits that they're going after have
Mm.
changed, and the recruits
Mm.
want to see a more modern army. So the
Mm.
army had to modernize themselves, and that was one of the impetuses for their rebrand. Now, that's a big shift. A small business who or a medium-sized business, maybe they've merged or acquired somebody. Well, how does that company fit into their brand? They've expanded the growth of their teams. Are we able to support that? Do we have the right tools? Did you go from a small $1 million business to overnight an $8 million business, and you're on a hiring frenzy, and you just never started with your brand? You just said, "Oh, my 13-year-old daughter drew a logo for me and it was good
Yeah.
enough, and that's it, and that was it." Well, and I used clip art from
Yeah.
Microsoft or wherever. But now you need to go pro, and you need to grow up a little bit. So maybe that's a reason. But again, and then you go back to let's just use Twitter to X. I'm not sure what the reasons there were. I could think of one. I'm not sure that was the best reason. Um,
Yeah. I'm
um,
still
and
convinced the reason for that was to become the all everything app. That we can you can bank on it, you can buy on it, you can shop on it, you can do absolutely everything on it. But I don't genuinely think people want that.
I I I mean that's a personal preference, I would say. But just backing that up a little bit, I would say while I do think there's a lot that he does that's really kind of wild and has pushed us as a society, as Earth, and how we approach business and how we do things, and he's really innovative. I don't know that I saw that in his move. I kind of saw it as more like maybe, and again, I'm just guessing one guy to another, but this guy got backed into a corner. Ego started writing
Yeah.
checks his body can't cash, and all of a sudden he found himself in a position, and he's like, "Well, I'm just going to parlay this into the most amount of press that I can think of, and just keep.
Yeah.
As long as I'm in the news, that's a good thing." But to your point, if there is a vision there and they're able to deliver on it, well, that's really wild. I mean, that's cool
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that's the way he's going. But I'm not seeing that yet. And to your point, is that what people really want? Is that what they're
Yeah.
going there for?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
yet.
I
It's
don't know.
not delivering on
I could
that.
think. I could think of other things to spend $44 billion US on.
Listen, I take a fraction of that and be very happy. I just, kick back and enjoy.
Absolutely. You
But
could solve a lot of problems with that, couldn't you?
make a
Darren,
lot of
it's
people
been
happy.
fascinating chatting with you. Where can we find you? Where's your
appreciate
website?
All spelled out, 1010group.com, TEN group.com. You can reach me on LinkedIn. As we've been talking, I'm always wanting to have a chat with someone who has questions, happy to address questions. The better the branding industry is, the better I think we all do. And certainly that trickles down to me. But more importantly, I feel very fortunate that I get to live in this world of branding and help people where I can. And it's just really cool to be able to have conversations with people such as yourself and others. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
No. I'll stick some links in the show notes, and folks can have a quick tap on that. Darren, thanks ever so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.